I have presided over thousands of cases during my years on the bench. I have seen murderers cry. I have watched innocent people collapse from relief after hearing a verdict. I have witnessed wealthy executives lose everything in a single afternoon. But there was one case that still comes back to me whenever someone says that money can buy respect. Believe me, the young woman at the center of this case believed exactly that. And by the time she realized how wrong she was, the damage had already been done. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in Los Angeles, the kind of gray morning that makes everyone arrive at court irritated before the day even begins. My courtroom was already crowded. Several routine civil disputes were scheduled. Nothing unusual, nothing memorable. At least, that's what I thought. Then the courtroom doors opened, and everything changed. The young woman who entered looked as if she were walking into a luxury fashion show instead of a courtroom. Designer sunglasses, diamond earrings, a handbag that probably cost more than most people earned in several months. Her confidence wasn't the kind that comes from accomplishment. It was something else, entitlement. Years on the bench teach you how to recognize it immediately. She walked without hesitation, without uncertainty, without even the smallest sign of concern, as if the entire legal system existed merely to inconvenience her schedule. Behind her followed two attorneys carrying expensive briefcases. Then came a sharply dressed, middle-aged man. I recognized him instantly. Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Technologies, a billionaire, one of the most powerful businessmen in California. His company employed thousands. His face appeared regularly in business magazines. And according to numerous reports, his only daughter had never been told no in her entire life. Her name was Victoria Bennett, 24 years old, educated at elite private schools, raised among wealth most people could barely imagine, and standing before me that morning because of a lawsuit involving reckless property damage and intimidation. The plaintiff was a small business owner named Daniel Carter, a hardworking man in his 40s. No bodyguards, no expensive lawyers, no billionaire father, just an ordinary citizen seeking justice. As I reviewed the case file, I noticed something disturbing. Several witness statements described Victoria behaving aggressively after a minor parking dispute. According to reports, insults escalated, threats followed, then significant property damage occurred. The details were serious enough that this hearing had attracted local media attention. Still, the moment I looked up from the file and saw Victoria's expression, I knew the paperwork wasn't telling the entire story, because she wasn't nervous, she wasn't worried, she wasn't even pretending to respect the process. She looked bored. The spectators noticed it too. People exchanged glances. Whispers spread through the gallery. Meanwhile, Victoria slowly removed her sunglasses and looked around the courtroom, not with curiosity, not with humility, but with visible annoyance, as if she couldn't believe she was being forced to spend her morning among ordinary people. I have seen arrogance before, many times, but genuine arrogance has a very specific quality. It isn't loud, it isn't emotional, it is calm certainty. The certainty that consequences belong to other people, not you. And Victoria Bennett possessed that certainty in dangerous amounts. Court began. The bailiff called the room to order. Everyone stood, everyone except one person, Victoria. She remained seated, crossing one leg over the other, scrolling through her phone. The silence that followed was remarkable. Even her attorneys looked alarmed. One quickly leaned down and whispered something urgently. Only then did she stand, slowly, reluctantly, without apology. I remember watching the faces of the jury candidates sitting nearby. Several already looked unimpressed. That mattered. People often forget that every action communicates something, especially inside a courtroom. When proceedings finally began, I addressed both parties. Daniel Carter listened carefully. His hands remained folded. His attention never wandered. Victoria, meanwhile, appeared more interested in checking social media notifications. Every few minutes, her eyes dropped toward her phone. Every few minutes, an attorney whispered reminders. The contrast couldn't have been more obvious. And then, something happened that immediately changed the atmosphere inside the room. I asked a simple procedural question, one that required only a brief response. Before her attorney could answer, Victoria suddenly laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an accidental one, a deliberate laugh, loud enough for everyone to hear. The courtroom became silent. I looked directly at her. "So something is amusing, Miss Bennett." She smirked, actually smirked. Then she said words I will never forget. "Honestly, Judge," she paused, glancing around the courtroom, "I just didn't expect this place to look so cheap." You could feel the air leave the room. Gasps emerged from several spectators. One reporter nearly dropped a pen. Even her father's face changed color. I have witnessed defendants insult lawyers, witnesses, opposing parties, but insulting the court itself? That requires a level of arrogance most people never reach. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Not her attorneys, not her father, not the plaintiff. Nobody. I simply watched her. Because experience has taught me something important. When people reveal who they are, let them finish. Victoria mistook my silence for weakness. Many arrogant people do. She leaned back confidently, certain she controlled the room, certain her wealth protected her, certain her father's influence could erase any mistake. But I noticed something she didn't, a reaction. Not from the audience, not from the media, not even from me, from her father. Richard Bennett had suddenly become very still. His expression hardened, his eyes fixed directly on his daughter. And for the first time that morning, he looked worried, deeply worried. At that moment, I realized something. This wasn't merely a spoiled young woman acting out. There was something larger, hidden beneath the surface, something her father understood, something the courtroom didn't yet know. And before the day ended, a piece of evidence would appear on the courtroom screen that would leave the entire room speechless, including me. And the person responsible for exposing it would be the last individual anyone expected. I turned my attention away from Victoria Bennett for a moment and looked at Daniel Carter. That man was not rich. He was not powerful. He did not arrive with cameras waiting outside. But he had something Victoria did not have: dignity. He sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, shoulders slightly tense, eyes fixed on the floor, as if he was trying to keep himself calm. I had seen that look before. It is the look of a person who has been humiliated once already and now fears being humiliated again in public. His small repair shop had been damaged. His livelihood had been threatened. And yet the woman accused of doing it was sitting 10 feet away from him, acting as if this entire courtroom was beneath her. Victoria's attorney stood and began speaking in that polished corporate tone lawyers use when they want arrogance to sound reasonable. He claimed the situation was exaggerated. He claimed emotions had run high. He suggested Daniel had misunderstood Victoria's intentions. That word caught my attention. Misunderstood. It is a dangerous word in court because sometimes people use it when they do not want to say the truth. Daniel's attorney, a quiet public interest lawyer named Rachel Morgan, rose next. She was calm, precise, not theatrical. And I noticed Victoria barely looked at her. That was a mistake. In court, the quiet lawyer is often the one carrying the sharpest knife. Rachel explained that Daniel Carter owned an auto repair shop near a luxury shopping district. On the afternoon in question, Victoria Bennett had parked her sports car across the entrance to his business, not for 5 minutes, not by accident, for nearly 40 minutes. Daniel had asked her politely to move it. Witnesses said he apologized before even making the request. That told me something about him immediately. Some people apologize before defending themselves because life has taught them that powerful people punish resistance. Victoria, according to the complaint, laughed in his face. Then she called him garage trash. The courtroom shifted when that phrase was read aloud. Daniel closed his eyes. Victoria did not react, not one flicker of shame. Rachel continued. After Daniel threatened to call a tow truck, Victoria allegedly threw a drink against his storefront window, knocked over a display rack, and told him her father could buy the entire block before lunch. That line created another wave of whispers. But I was watching Richard Bennett. His jaw tightened, his hands clasped together. That was not the reaction of a man hearing false accusations. That was the reaction of a father recognizing a pattern. Victoria finally looked up and rolled her eyes. A small gesture, but in a courtroom, small gestures become evidence of character. I asked her attorney whether his client disputed the basic timeline. He stood carefully. Your Honor, Ms. Bennett acknowledges a disagreement occurred, but denies intentional property damage. Intentional, another careful word. I looked at Victoria. Ms. Bennett, do you understand why you were here? She smiled, not warmly, not respectfully, a thin smile. Yes, I understand someone wants money from my family. A murmur moved through the gallery. Daniel's face hardened. Rachel Morgan looked down at her notes, but I saw her expression change. She was waiting. Good lawyers know when silence is useful. I leaned forward. No, Ms. Bennett, you are here because a citizen claims you damaged his property and used intimidation to avoid accountability. For the first time, her smile weakened, only slightly. Then she glanced at her father. That glance told me more than her words. She was not looking for comfort. She was looking for rescue. I have seen children do that at every age. 5 years old, 15, 24. The face changes, but the expectation remains the same. Fix this for me. Richard Bennett did not move. And that seemed to disturb her. Rachel called Daniel Carter to speak. He stood slowly. His voice shook at first, but he forced himself to continue. He told the court about his shop, how he opened it after his wife died, how it helped him raise his younger sister's son, how every window, every sign, every tool inside that building represented years of unpaid weekends and sleepless nights. Then he described Victoria's arrival, the white sports car blocking the entrance, customers leaving because they could not get in, the polite request, the insult, the laughter. As Daniel spoke, Victoria whispered something to one of her attorneys. Then she laughed again, quietly this time, but not quietly enough. Daniel stopped speaking. That was the moment the room changed. Not because of what she said, because of what her laugh did to him. It took a grown man, already standing in a courtroom, against a billionaire's daughter, and made him feel small all over again. I looked at Victoria. Miss Bennett, she froze. You will not mock a witness in my courtroom. Her attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, my client meant no disrespect. I raised one hand. He sat back down. Victoria's face flushed, not with embarrassment, with anger. That difference matters. Embarrassment asks, what have I done? Anger asks, how dare you correct me? And Victoria Bennett was angry. Daniel continued. He said Victoria had walked toward the shop door after throwing the drink. He said she told him he would regret embarrassing her. Then, according to him, she picked up a metal display stand and shoved it into the glass panel beside the entrance. The repair cost was listed at $8,700. But Daniel said the money was not the worst part. The worst part was the video. I noticed Victoria's attorney stiffen. There it was, the first crack. Daniel explained that shortly after the incident, a short clip appeared online. It showed him standing outside his shop, looking upset, while Victoria's friends laughed behind the camera. The caption called him the angriest little mechanic in LA. The clip had been shared thousands of times. Customers recognized him. Teenagers came by just to mock him. Someone spray-painted garage trash on the side of his building. As he said those words, his voice broke. The courtroom went silent. Not the ordinary silence of people listening, a heavier silence, the kind that enters a room when people realize cruelty has layers. Victoria stared at the table, but I could tell she still was not sorry. She was calculating. There is a difference. Sorry looks inward. Calculation looks for escape routes. Rachel Morgan then said she had witnesses, a store owner, a delivery driver, a former employee of Bennett Technologies. That last one made Victoria's head lift sharply. Richard Bennett closed his eyes. Only for a second, but I saw it. And suddenly I understood why he had looked worried from the beginning. This case was not just about a broken window. It was about a secret. A secret someone close to the Bennett family had finally decided to bring into my courtroom. Rachel Morgan turned toward me and said calmly, Your Honor, before we proceed further, the plaintiff requests permission to introduce a recording obtained from a witness who feared retaliation. Victoria's attorney shot to his feet. Objection! Too fast. Much too fast. The room stirred. Victoria's face changed completely. For the first time that morning, the bored millionaire's daughter disappeared. In her place was someone alert, someone frightened, someone who knew exactly what might be on that recording. I looked from Victoria to her father. Richard Bennett was staring straight ahead, pale and motionless. And I remember thinking, whatever was on that recording, it was not just going to damage Victoria Bennett. It was going to expose the entire machine that had protected her. I have learned something after decades on the bench. The truth rarely announces itself. It slips into a courtroom quietly, sometimes hidden inside a single sentence, sometimes concealed inside a nervous glance, and sometimes inside a recording nobody expected to hear. The objection from Victoria's attorney hung in the air. The man was usually composed, professional, measured, but his reaction had come too quickly, too emotionally. That alone caught my attention. I looked toward Rachel Morgan. "Counselor, what is the nature of this recording?" She remained calm. "Your Honor, the recording was provided by a former executive assistant employed by Bennett Technologies. She came forward after seeing the online harassment directed at Mr. Carter." The courtroom immediately erupted into whispers. A former employee. That changed everything. Corporate insiders rarely risk their careers unless they have seen something they can no longer ignore. Victoria shifted in her seat. For the first time all day, she looked uncomfortable. Her confidence was beginning to crack. Only slightly, but I noticed. Judges notice everything, especially when powerful people begin losing control. Her attorney stood again. "This recording is unreliable hearsay," Rachel immediately responded. "The witness is prepared to testify under oath." Silence. The defense attorney slowly sat down. That reaction told me more than any argument. He knew the witness was real. I approved the introduction of the evidence. And that is when the atmosphere inside my courtroom changed forever. Rachel called the witness, a woman named Emily Sanders, 32 years old, former executive assistant to Richard Bennett. Neatly dressed, visibly nervous, yet determined. She walked to the witness stand carrying years of anxiety on her shoulders. I have seen witnesses motivated by revenge, greed, attention. Emily did not resemble any of them. She looked exhausted, like someone tired of carrying a secret. After taking the oath, she sat down carefully. Rachel approached. "Miss Sanders, how long did you work for Bennett Technologies?" "Almost 7 years." "Did your responsibilities include coordinating personal matters for members of the Bennett family?" "Yes." "Specifically, Victoria Bennett?" Emily swallowed. "Yes." The room became still. Rachel continued. "During those 7 years, did you observe a pattern of behavior?" Defense counsel immediately objected. I overruled. The witness answered, "Yes." "What kinds of pattern?" Emily hesitated. Then she looked toward Victoria. I will never forget that moment. Because Victoria wasn't looking angry anymore. She was looking scared. Real fear. The kind that appears when someone realizes their version of events is no longer the only version available. Emily finally spoke. "Whenever Victoria got into trouble, someone cleaned it up. Nobody moved. Nobody even coughed." The courtroom listened. "Can you explain?" Emily nodded. "There were complaints from restaurants, luxury stores, private clubs, hotels." Rachel stepped closer. "And what happened after those complaints?" Emily's voice became quieter. "Money happened." The words landed like a hammer. "Meaning?" "Settlements, payments, legal threats, public relations teams, whatever was necessary." The spectators exchanged stunned looks. Even the journalists stopped writing for a moment. Rachel continued carefully. "Did you personally witness such situations?" "Yes." "How many?" Emily closed her eyes briefly. "Too many to count." A heavy silence settled across the courtroom. Meanwhile, Richard Bennett remained motionless, his face impossible to read. Victoria looked down at the table. The arrogance was disappearing. Fear was replacing it. Rachel then asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Did there come a point when you decided you could no longer participate?" "Yes." "Why?" Emily's answer changed everything. "Because someone got hurt." The entire courtroom froze. I leaned forward slightly. "Explain." Emily took a breath. About 18 months before the incident involving Mr. Carter, Victoria was involved in another confrontation. Victoria suddenly looked up. Panic flashed across her face. Pure panic. Rachel continued. What happened? Emily answered. A parking valet asked Victoria to move her vehicle. The room became silent again. The similarity was obvious. Then there was an argument, then shouting, then Victoria pushed him. The spectators stared. Emily continued. He fell backward, hit his head. A woman in the gallery gasped. The defense attorney looked absolutely miserable. And Victoria? Victoria looked like someone watching the dam collapse. Piece by piece. Rachel asked quietly, what happened afterward? Emily lowered her head. The man suffered a concussion. The room exploded with whispers. I struck the gavel. Order returned. Barely. What happened next? Rachel asked. Emily looked toward Richard Bennett. Then she answered. The family made the incident disappear. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the reporters seemed stunned. Rachel then revealed something nobody expected. Miss Sanders, is the recording connected to that pattern? Yes. Who appears in the recording? Emily swallowed. Victoria Bennett. The spectators visibly reacted. I looked toward defense counsel. He stared at the table, defeated. Rachel continued. What is Victoria discussing in that recording? Emily answered carefully. The fact that nobody can stop her. The room became absolutely silent. I could hear pages shifting, air conditioning humming, nothing else. Rachel looked at me. Your Honor, we request permission to play the recording. I granted permission. A technician approached the evidence monitor. The large screen illuminated. Every eye turned forward. Victoria stopped breathing for a moment. At least it appeared that way. Her face had gone completely pale. Meanwhile, her father remained frozen, expressionless, like a man watching consequences arrive after years of delay. The file loaded. The room waited. And then the recording began. Victoria appeared on screen, sitting beside two friends inside a luxury penthouse. Champagne glasses visible, music playing softly. Everyone watched carefully. The young woman on screen laughed, then said something that instantly changed the atmosphere inside my courtroom. Something so arrogant, so disturbing, that several jurors would later admit they could hardly believe it was real. And as the recording continued, I realized this case was far bigger than property damage, far bigger than a billionaire's spoiled daughter, because hidden inside that video was evidence of something nobody had suspected, something involving Bennett Technologies itself, something that could destroy careers, fortunes, possibly even a corporate empire. And the worst part, Victoria hadn't realized she was recording her own downfall. I have presided over thousands of hearings throughout my career. Most people believe dramatic courtroom moments happen because of shouting, because of anger, because of confrontation. They are wrong. The most powerful courtroom moments happen during silence. And the silence that followed the recording was unlike anything I had heard in years. Victoria Bennett's own voice echoed through the courtroom speakers, clear, confident, careless. On the screen, she laughed with her friends while discussing Daniel Carter and several previous incidents. Then she said the sentence that destroyed her defense. I don't care what happens. My dad's people always make problems disappear. The entire room froze. Even her attorneys looked defeated. But the recording wasn't finished. Not even close. Moments later, one of her friends asked if she was worried about being sued. Victoria laughed again. Then she answered, "Why would I be? We pay people. They go away. That's how the world works." A shocked murmur swept through the gallery. Several reporters immediately began writing. The jurors stared at the screen. And for the first time all day, Victoria Bennett looked genuinely terrified because she finally understood what everyone else understood. This wasn't an accusation anymore. It was evidence. Evidence spoken by her own mouth. Then came the final blow. The recording revealed messages discussing damage to Daniel Carter's property before she publicly denied responsibility. In other words, she knew exactly what had happened, and she lied about it. The defense attempted one final objection. It failed. The evidence was overwhelming. The witness testimony matched. The recording matched. The physical evidence matched. Every piece connected perfectly. I looked toward Daniel Carter. The man sat quietly, not celebrating, not smiling, simply waiting. That told me everything I needed to know about his character. He hadn't come seeking revenge. He had come seeking justice. There is a difference. Then I turned toward Richard Bennett. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked him a simple question. Mr. Bennett, Were you aware of this behavior? The billionaire lowered his eyes. The entire courtroom waited. Then he answered, "Not all of it." A pause followed. His voice became heavier, but enough of it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Richard Bennett continued, "I spent years solving problems instead of teaching consequences." The room remained silent. "I thought I was protecting my daughter." His eyes shifted toward Victoria. "I was actually hurting her." Victoria immediately began crying. Not angry tears, not frustrated tears, real tears. Perhaps for the first time in her life, she was confronting something money could not fix: the truth. I have watched many wealthy defendants enter court believing influence is power, but real power is accountability. The courage to face consequences, the courage to admit wrongdoing. And that courage had been absent from Victoria's life for far too long. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, my ruling was clear. I found in favor of Daniel Carter. Full compensation for property damage. Full compensation for business losses. Additional punitive damages based on deliberate misconduct and intimidation. The total judgment exceeded 6 figures. Gasps filled the courtroom, but I wasn't finished. I ordered the recording and related evidence forwarded for further review regarding possible civil and corporate misconduct uncovered during testimony. Several attorneys immediately exchanged worried looks. The consequences would extend far beyond this courtroom. Then I addressed Victoria directly. The room became completely silent. "Ms. Bennett," she slowly stood. Tears streamed down her face. I looked directly at her. "You entered this courtroom believing wealth placed you above ordinary people." She lowered her head. "You mocked a hardworking citizen. You mocked this court. And most importantly," I paused, "you mocked responsibility." The silence felt enormous. Then I delivered the final words. "Character is revealed by how a person treats those who cannot benefit them." Victoria began sobbing, not because of the money, not because of the judgment, but because for the first time, nobody was rescuing her. Nobody was cleaning up the mess. Nobody was making the consequences disappear. The hearing ended. Daniel Carter quietly shook his attorney's hand. Then he left the courtroom. No celebration, no victory speech, just dignity. Richard Bennett approached his daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder. They walked out together, not as a billionaire and an heiress, but as a father and daughter facing a difficult truth. Months later, I learned that Daniel rebuilt his business successfully. Community members supported him. Customers returned. His reputation recovered. As for Victoria, I was told she spent the following year performing community service and participating in programs focused on accountability and victim awareness. Perhaps she changed. Perhaps she finally understood. I hope so. Because the lesson from that day was never about money. It was never about status. It was never about power. It was about something far simpler. The law does not care who your father is. The truth does not care how wealthy you are. And respect cannot be purchased. It must be earned. That rainy Tuesday began with a millionaire CEO's daughter mocking a courtroom. It ended with her learning the one lesson nobody had ever taught her. Actions have consequences, and sooner or later, everyone must answer for them. Case closed.